the WHO says immobility is the fourth leading cause of global death.
Woo.
And it contributes to so many cancers, heart disease, mental health problems, all things you wouldn't even think, right? And sleep problems, right? So just
Mm.
being still is,
Henry Abbott, we're super warmed up already. I brought you on here because you have an amazing book that's just launching called Ballistic, The New Science of Injury-Free Athletic Performance. But I'm really interested to learn about your background and your long career in the world of sports. And we're going to get to a variety of topics, especially the cutting edge athletic training and mobility rehabilitation, injury prevention kind of things that you've been working on. So, welcome and thanks for joining us.
I just know this is going to be fun. I can already tell, maybe from the guy behind you jumping over the high bar. It
Yep, he
feels
saw
like,
my high jumper logo, people, and then we started
yeah.
talking track and field, and we got deep into it before I hit record. I'm like, let's hit record, man. Let's do this.
Couple of
Yeah,
track nerds, let's go.
yeah, man. Yeah. Um, and I think he had some good ideas about, increasing the popularity of track and field and running, which is still kind of struggling in comparison to the major sports. So, what is your assessment of the state of that scene?
Well, everything that succeeds in media, as far as I can tell, is about like human in struggle, right? And so
Mm.
we really have that, right? You do triathlons, right? So you know that there's a moment late in the game where you're like, oh, now I'm doing a gut check. Like, let's see if I can do this. Like that is resonant to a single mom who's wondering if she can keep down two jobs
Mm.
while taking care of the kids. And like these are these human relatable moments, and they're mostly missed by the broadcast because the broadcast just shows the lead pack the whole time, or nothing at all, which is another option for triathlons, right? But I think you want to see these gritty come from behind. Like sometimes the guy in eighth decides just to go for it, right? And it works out. And that's going to be off camera. So I think little monitors on everybody, course profiles, and drones, and we can get a sense of like, well, this guy's in fifth, but his heart rate's still low. Maybe he's saving something, and then we can focus more on this kind of cat and mouse that happens in the best performances.
Yeah, good point. I think when we see these formal broadcasts, like NBC Sports is the one that covers track and field, and as a deep enthusiast, I know a lot of background about the athletes, and for some reason, the commentators aren't sharing those human elements. I think they do a better job in other sports, but I'd like to know that this athlete moved from her Caribbean base to Florida to train with a new coach this year, and they're emphasizing more time in the weight room or whatever. I think
Hmm.
people would
Hmm.
really care about that, even if they're not deep track and field enthusiasts. I watch my wife watching the programming and what she's interested in as a non-track fan and deeply getting reeled in more and more every time
Hmm.
we go and tend to meet or watch. And it's that background stuff that everyone responds to.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And they know it. I mean, these are accessible athletes. I've been covering the NBA
Mm.
most of my life, and like we just don't always get to know that stuff. But in track and field, they do. You know that Kara Goucher knows all this stuff, right? He tips her hand a little bit. I'm like, oh, let us hear some. I see. I'll tell you. But I got my kids out of bed during the Olympics a while ago. Molly Huddle crossed. She had one lap to go, and I want to say the 1500, and was in sixth place. And she'd been training her whole life for this moment, and
Mm.
sixth place is not what she wanted, right? And what impressed me so much, this gives me goosebumps. Literally my hair is saying, she just super calm. She did not scowl. She just was like, I got to get up there. And she just ding, ding, ding. And she ended up on the podium. She got third. And I wanted them to see that like mostly when we see like great athletic performance, it's some sort of Hail Mary, some sort of half court shot, something that seems kind of more exciting. This was more just like quiet determination, and I wanted them to see that
Mm.
that's like a really awesome part of this sport. And you don't get to. It's not. It's usually off camera. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
when that happens.
Yeah. So you do have that deep history with the NBA. What is it like to cover that sport and also watch the tremendous growth and popularity in recent years?
Well, it can make your shoulder tired. I've literally spent a lot of time like holding a microphone like this. Like I'm not even kidding. It's literally like talking to some very tall person.
Yeah.
No, it's a very free moving sport, and I feel like it's kind of overtly just kind of astounding, right? If you get to sit close to the action. Anybody knows it's exciting, right? Everybody knows if you give a kid like a garbage can and a ball, like they already know what's supposed to happen, right? There's something kind of human about this sport. Just you put put the ball in the can, right? That's what we do. And so, yeah, I think they're brilliant. I think they are. I think right now these are the best players in the history of the world. I think it's, we're really spoiled with this. I have my quibbles about how the sport's administered, and there's a lot of honestly. Before I wrote this book, I was doing this whole dirty money in sports project.
Mm,
That's an unpleasant topic, Brad. Let me tell you.
mm,
But um, but yeah, I do think that the biggest issue in the sport right now is injuries.
mm.
My friend Tom Haberstroh shared a little social media post a couple weeks ago that at that time, 50% of the NBA stars were out injured. 50%.
Oof.
Um, and it's been bad my whole career, but getting worse because the sport's so much more intense now. The athleticism is off the charts.
Mm.
The game is played at a faster speed, jumping higher, cutting harder, and the bodies just can't take the 82 game season anymore. So we're seeing, like I think, you know, there's a lot of controversy around Kawhi Leonard, who sometimes is the best player in the history of the league, and most of the time is not playing, right? Like this is the modern player, right? Is they just can't cope with it, which was part of the reason I wanted to look into this whole injury thing because it's underpinning, the NBA's future growth is can they solve it?
Well, I think the first place to look is the 82 game season, which is a ridiculous grind
Thank you.
when we're talking about, it's a sport of athleticism, power, explosiveness, but it turns into be this grueling endurance slog because they have to play so frequently and travel so much, and it's just a bad match. But I guess that's where you have to have that many games to bring in that type of revenue. The players don't mind getting paid a lot of money, but I think that's a place to focus if we could shorten the season and make it more quality or something.
Yeah, there's this top doctor from the Mayo Clinic. He's a brilliant guy. He was saying that, humans can't like you can do 5 max effort workouts every 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Beyond that, you
Hmm.
performance declines and injury rates skyrocket, right? And so the NBA, every single player, every single 2 weeks plays more than that. And I think it's an entertainment industry choice. So my friend Kevin Arnovitz, there's a somewhere online you can find this brilliant talk he gave at the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference about how like Game of Thrones, I think in its final season maybe had like a 7 episode season, 6 episodes. The NBA's got a TV season that's 1,230 episodes.
Hmm.
And they have this kind of low quality volume play, and as an entertainment product, it's about the same as a Seinfeld rerun. And so they pump out this kind of crappy product, and they just need a ton of them because they don't get to charge very much for it. Like what the NFL does is more like Game of Thrones. We're like, we just
Hmm.
have a precious few, and we're going to charge you a fortune for them, and we're going to make everybody stay home and watch. And if you can get a ticket, you're going to go because it's must see, right? And the NBA just doesn't have that approach, but I think it might take some courage. But I think that's the future is that's the best use of LeBron's
Hmm.
crazy unique body, right? It's like you want to see him jump as high as he can, run as fast as he can. Instead, we just see him play 4 nights out of 5, and he's smart not to run fast and jump high in that setting.
Well, I mean, it's hard to discern too. They still look like they're amazing athletes playing hard at any regular season game. But you can tell there's a level up in the playoffs where you see the defense coming on a lot stronger and their full capabilities. I mean, they seem like the athletes are trained better these days. What do you think about behind the scenes? Are the athletes doing the best they can to take care of themselves through this grind and the coaches and the trainers?
So it's a great question. Um, no, in a word, I don't think they're doing the best they can. Yes, it's better for sure. It's better. I mean, when I started covering the league, people smoked. People would
Right.
go out and party and play hungover, and like, no, that doesn't happen anymore, right? The game is too intense. You can't be smoking. Like that's a big step.
Yeah.
Um, but so I spent a lot of time for this book at this place called P3 in Santa Barbara, where
Wow.
more than 70% of the NBA has been assessed by them, the
Mm.
current rostered players. And their position is basically that NBA players don't train hard at all because they can't, right? Like when you do a really hard workout, you want 3 days before you
Hmm.
compete again. And in season, they never get that, right? So they go there and they'll spend, 5, 6, 7 weeks of the off season. Right now, there's a whole bunch of players there preparing for the NBA draft. They'll be there for 5, 6, 7 weeks, and they'll get their numbers. I can explain more what their numbers are, but their movement quality numbers, their injury risk numbers will be down. Their movement quality numbers will be up, right? and they'll look really good. And then they just won't have the opportunity. They'll go off to the season and they'll come back next off season and their numbers will be bad, right? Because they just haven't had a chance to do the maintenance work they need to do to keep their hips and feet and lower leg muscles and backs and everything tip top.
Yeah, yeah. That's Marcus Elliott's facility
Hmm.
in Santa Barbara, and these are pretty common popping up around catering to professional athletes, where it's like a training center. Maybe you can describe more what they do there, what's so special about P3 and the other places like it.
Yeah. So this guy, Marcus Elliott, he tore his ACL on his 17th birthday in football practice. And then he got depressed and he retreated to his bedroom, and his girlfriend left him for the guy who took his place on the football team. And he was, it wasn't a great year. He resolved to give up his future playing football and instead figure out the human body so that other people wouldn't have to go through what he went through. But what do you study when you want to prevent sports injuries, right? It's not clear. He studied biochemistry undergrad. Then he went to Harvard Medical School and was like delivering babies and dealing with infectious diseases and all this stuff. He came up with a protocol that attracted the interest of the New England Patriots to identify who was at risk for hamstring injuries
Mm.
based on, all kinds of inputs, time of year, what position you play, how fast you run your running form as analyzed on video, etc. And that seemed like pretty promising. There was some signal there in the noise that you could go and give a targeted training to this wide receiver or this cornerback so they would not have the hamstring injury they were at risk for. Um, then he worked for the Seattle Mariners. Then he started P3. Um, Eventually, they kept trying. They had like brain scanning devices. They had all kinds of different tech to try to see like what was upstream from a catastrophic injury. They're trying to mimic how we treat heart disease, right? We used to just think heart attacks were acts of God. Then we learned that your arterial blood flow slows down for a decade, right? And you can treat the heart attack before you have it, which is like the most successful medical intervention in human history. So
You're
eventually,
making an analogy to now. A matter of fact, athletes can be identified that they're about to get hosed because they're totally dysfunctional, which we
yeah,
before never did, right? We just saw the poor misfortune of the guy getting tackled and not getting up.
exactly right. So there are these now, thanks to they have force plates and infrared cameras in the ceiling, they have I think it's 134.4 terabytes of data from elite athletes moving around. And they have machine learning just kind of saying like, okay, this guy tore his ACL. What did it look like before? And they're having real answers now. The data is they've been doing this for a while. They have 10 years of thousands of athletes, and now you can really see, what are the movements that what does an ACL tear look like in the years before the ACL tear? There are real answers in the movement data.
So this was kind of in course of preparing this book, Ballistic. You spent a lot of time there looking at the high tech analysis, and tell us more. Let's transition into what this book's all about.
So, well, I'm a little bit right now. My head is full of I heard you talking to Alex Hutchinson, right? And this question of, is running good for people, right? Is it that's kind of what you were talking about, right? And the answer is it's good for some people, right? I
Mhm.
think we all agree, right? Alex is like, well, I trained for this and I can run a pretty long distance and feel good. And you're like, I want to train for 400. And if you go much further, people get kind of obsessive and running these marathons and grind their bodies to a pulp, right? Um, what I'm hearing behind this is like we don't it's not the same sport for everybody, right? And force of landing. This book's called Ballistic because it's about being the airborne and then landing. That's the definition of ballistic, right? The moment of landing is the moment you're getting these non-contact injuries, right? The forces are ridiculous. There's an NBA player who stepped off an 18-inch box, just stepped off, lands on the force plates with 11,000 newtons of force. For context, a pro boxer punching you is about 100 newtons.
Hmm.
There's some academic studies where poor people, have the job of figuring out how much force it takes to fully sever the spine of a cadaver. The answer is about 3,000 newtons.
Mhm.
So this NBA player without legs, right, would just be destroyed, falling at that rate, right? So you need the three stack joints, ankles, knees, and hips, to be your springs, right? Some of us have that working well, some of us don't,
Hmm.
right? If you have it working well, I would argue you can run. You can run till you're old as hell because you're putting the force into your Achilles and your quads and your glutes, and you can kind of bounce along, and the force of landing is attenuated by these brilliant soft tissues. But if, like me, I'm a long time runner, but I don't use my hips very well when I land, then that same force that would be going into my glutes goes into my lower back. And
Hmm.
so without some improvement, my extra running, my extra miles for my ultra marathon or whatever would really destroy me, right? So I think that it kind of there's an answer here. We can see into this black box of movement and say, "Ooh, like Brad, you're good to go, right? You can run a marathon." Oh, over here, let's build up the muscles of your lower leg, or let's get your neurological timing different. Let's change your hips, etc., before you would endeavor to do such a risky thing.
That's interesting where you talk about the importance of those three joints. And we talk so much with Palooza shoes. The listeners have heard me talk about how, we need to get back to barefoot functionality because the foot is the true technology, not all these shoes and things that we've been marketed to thinking that when I put this thing on, I'm going to jump higher or land more safely. It's actually the opposite is true. And when we encase our feet in shoes for our whole life, they become weak and dysfunctional and atrophied. And so I'm wondering if is that an element of modern cutting edge sophisticated athletic training where the athletes are putting their shoes aside for training purposes, getting their feet strong, and then of course they're going to slip into their basketball shoes during the game or their spikes when they're running in a track meet.
Totally. Yeah. So you know, basketball doesn't have a lot of gear, right? Yeah, but it's not like hockey or kite surfing or whatever. Like you walk into the gym with your shoes, right? That's what you have. And players walk into P3 with their shoes, and then a lot of times they keep them off for the workout. The specific reason is that one of the most dangerous foot positions that they encounter is a toes down landing.
Mm.
So I said that 11,000 newtons, like all of the biggest measurements that they encounter at P3 come from your toes land first, and then boom, here comes your heel, and it slaps down really hard. That means that like the two forces, right? Your torso is 80% of your weight, and it's free falling. And then there's the earth is pretty strong and tough and immovable, right? They're going to meet if you go heel down through your tibia, which at one end will have the ground and the other end your knee, right? Which is a pretty delicate thing. Um, that's more likely if you're in shoes that pitch you forward, right? Your 10 millimeter drop standard athletic shoes encourage you to land that way. So if you're doing big explosive movements at P3, they ask you to take your shoes off. If you're wearing zero drop shoes, they would not ask you to take your shoes off. So that's the kind of stuff they have findings like this all over the place, but this is the kind of stuff where they'll watch you and see how you move. And I did talk to a guy. There's a whole chapter on shoes. I talked to a guy named Dave Bond, fascinating guy. He was the head of Jordan brand. He knows all about shoes, athletic shoes. And he was like, these zero drop shoes haven't come to basketball yet because they look weird. And people want basketball shoes to look cool, but
Wow, that's scary. I think the same can be said for running shoes and the obsession with extreme cushioning. A lot of it's because of cultural programming, not
sure.
necessarily research. In fact, there is no research that running shoes lessen impact trauma or prevent injuries. That's from Steve Magnus' great
Love that guy.
articles
Yeah.
on scienceofrunning.com. But it's such a shocker because all you see when you flip through the magazines or wherever you're getting your advertising is how the new stability motion control shoe will help you, not pronate, which is a natural function of the foot to absorb impact and generate propulsion. So it is incredibly ridiculous how we've been brainwashed to think that we need these shoes to be functional and to be safe.
There's a lower extremity review article that's an academic journal from like 4 or 5 years ago that casually mentions as an aside that no athletic shoe has ever been shown to reduce injury. Like, do you know how much
That's a big
BS
statement right there,
they've been
man.
sold? Yeah. Whereas
Yeah.
there is evidence they've made it worse, right?
Mm.
Um,
Plenty.
what
Yeah.
One of the things that's a big deal, like a five-alarm fire at P3 is if they see you landing in what they call translation. It's pretty common. So they had to name it because no one had a name for it, but that is landing on the outside of your foot and then rolling to the inside. So your shin goes like a windshield wiper
Mm.
from outside to in. A little bit of that is unremarkable, but if it's 25 degrees, then like the injury risk is really.
Mm.
This is 100% of NBA players who tore their ACL in their study had this landing motion. 100%. And I was like, well, why would it do that? Why would your foot move like that? And at one point, one of the trainers was like, I just think it's kind of sloppy, just kind of weak, right? And
Mm.
And the fix is a fix for a fair amount of these ground contact issues they encounter, which are a really big concern there, is really strengthening the muscles of the lower leg, like the muscles below the knee. People think about the kind of the calf muscle that you can see is the gastroc, right? That's the one with the kind of bulb, but underneath is the soleus and the tibialis posterior, and they put a lot of focus into those two, and balance and coordination. And they just want to, and plyometrics, they just want to make it so that even if you stumble, even if you're an NBA player gets knocked in the lane, even if you're like spiking the ball at the volleyball net or triple jumping, so that without conscious thought, you throw that foot out in a way that makes it strong and stable. The term is stiffness, ankle stiffness,
Mm.
which means it's well positioned to engage your Achilles, toes up, ball your foot down, and then the Achilles, if your biomechanics are reasonable, will then stretch some and pass a lot of the force into your quads and then up to your glutes. With those three engaged, you can handle a ton of landing force. But if you don't have those three engaged, then injury risk is higher.
Yeah, my sports-minded physical therapist, Dr. Jonathan Sandberg, guest on the podcast, he talks about stiffness a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to explain, we also want to be flexible, mobile, not having this dysfunction that we associated with stiffness. So can you kind of like
Yeah.
go through the whole lower body and tell us what do we want to be loose, mobile, and flexible, and then what do we want stiff, or how do those things cross together?
Yeah, the word stiff is just a bad word. They just shouldn't
Mm,
call it that. It happens to be the biomechanical term
yeah.
for like being able to return a lot of force. So,
Mm.
um,
Rigidity, something better, some better word.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It sounds like you haven't stretched, right? Because that's exactly what that word means. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah. So I think the Tim Noakes. I'm looking over here because maybe I have the book here. But in that big lore of running book, it's like 1,000 pages of all this research from this guy in South Africa. But he contends that some runners carry 93% of the force from one step to the next, which means you don't have to put a lot of effort into the next step because you're bouncing along, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's stiffness,
Yeah.
right? That's meanwhile, which really means they're like rubber bands, right? The Achilles is the primary one, but also your glutes and your hammies and your quads, are literally stretching on landing, which is stopping you from tearing up your back or your tendons in your knee, etc. And then they snap back, and it's a freebie, right? Some people like I do this thing that's so dumb, which is I start to move. I can see this in my detailed assessment from them. I start to take the next step with my hips before I've flexed. So I'm just giving up
Mm.
all this free energy
Mm.
that I could get. So meanwhile, other runners, so 93% for the top runners, other runners only carry 40% or
Oof.
45% of the energy. So they have to work so much harder to run, and they're getting more injuries, right? So
A double whammy.
double whammy.
If you don't understand what Henry's talking about right now, go on YouTube and search for Usain Bolt slow motion or some such video where the graceful explosiveness of a top athlete, it's like a deer or watching a dog or a deer run too. They spring off the ground, which humans are capable of, and the best humans show. And then we can go Google a video like slow pack runners New York City Marathon, and that's where we see the clomping and the stomping, and you hear the person coming from behind rather than this graceful springing through life.
Sound is actually a pretty good measure.
Mm.
Like so when there's a collision, this is just straight physics. I hate that I had to learn physics. I like slept through physics in high school. I found it was so boring. And now for this book, I'm like, oh, I gotta study physics again. But so what we're talking about with I love your YouTube assignment here. But so that Usain Bolt, those are elastic collisions. Um, what you don't want is like a car crash is an inelastic collision.
Mm.
And a pretty efficient measure of an inelastic collision is sound. So, like if you're going down the stairs, thunk, 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 like I already know it's your heels. Like you can't even do that without with the ball of your foot. You can't make it
Yeah.
that loud. This is your little home P3 assessment, right? But yeah. So you want to move like a cat, right? You want to move. Uh, the way you do that is with all those stack joints working in unison, right? Like a little orchestral movement, which is I'm not going to tell you that it's easy, but that's what we're focusing on. That's what you
Mm.
want to do. That's what all the best runners do, right? All of them. There's no elite runner who's clumping. You don't get make the Olympics with that slapping sound you're talking about, right? It just doesn't
And
happen.
again, you have increased injury risk, whether you're interested in making the Olympics or not, or just want to finish your personal individual fitness goals. We all deserve to work on that and become more springy.
Springy. Yeah, that's the answer. And also the same training, right? It's neurological training, right? This is what the moment of being springy, there's too much happening too fast for you to manage it with your own brain, right? That's why the plyometric training, or they have this thing at P3 called the impulse box, where if you're doing it like Christian Ramirez, former UCLA quarterback who is beautiful on the thing. It looks like he's doing like a merengue.
Mm.
It's a little platform, sort of shaped like a little half pipe, and there's a little pattern that you move, and you just want to get faster, 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 faster until you blow it up. Then you just start again, try to go faster.
Oh,
And the whole point is you you can't get good at it with concentration. You have to relax. Like there's this thing like sprinters know, right? You like what do they say? Like fast and relaxed, right? Fast and
mm.
relaxed. You can't. Usain Bolt is actually he needs to hold the muscles of his core pretty loose, right? So he can spring and not get all clenched up. And so I did this impulse box training with Dr. Marcus Elliott standing uncomfortably close, going, relax, relax. And I was like, I am not relaxed. Okay, but eventually you kind of just get used to the sound of your feet. Bada boom, bada boom, bada boom, bada boom, and like kind of like that's the way you want to do it. But yeah, the trick is you're training these neurological systems. They already have you have some system right now, some motor programming of how you're going to throw your foot out if you start to stumble. Like you want to
Hmm.
tweak that. You can tweak it a little. You can train it a little. You can give your system better muscles, better neurological systems, better balance so that you can throw a foot out in a more likely to succeed way.
That's interesting if we back up a little just to emphasize the point that like the injuries are occurring from coming back down to earth. You don't get
Mhm.
injured jumping up and dunking a basketball or any such thing. It's all about the impact from landing, right?
I mean, I'm sure there's every kind of injury, right? Crazy things happen.
Yeah.
People,
Well, if
I
you
know,
jump off poorly, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But it's
One guy got hurt with his catching his fingernail on the rim. I saw that looked
mm,
painful. So, that can happen. But no, the big category, like the big category of preventable non-contact injuries is 100% from landing in their data, right? So, it's just the forces are massive. There's nothing that matches it. Like literally nothing any athlete does. There's this guy Yuri Verkhoshansky,
hmm
and he was studying his triathletes in the Soviet Union, and you know he had a bunch of guys who could hit the ground in their last step before the final jump or the triple jump. And I said triathletes, triple jumpers is what I meant.
hmm
The final jump, and you can do some math on how much they weigh and how far they fly, and know that they were pushing on the ground with 300 kilograms of force. But none of them could lift 300 kilograms in the gym.
Right.
So like, they can, but we know they can't. So like, what's the deal, right? And the answer is it's super fast. Like
Mm.
because you're on the ground, you can because you're carrying the force from the approach and doing it super fast, which unlocks just much bigger forces. All the biggest forces we manage are from this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, we get trained in how to hold the bar to do a squat, make sure your form is perfect. But you're handling way bigger forces when you jump around, right? And no
Right.
one gets trained in how to jump around. So that's what they're doing. They're training you to, you know, handle the biggest forces you're going to deal with, which is from landing.
So one of the themes of the book is that we generally don't do any of this crap,
Mhm.
as even a devoted fitness enthusiast is spending a lot of time pulling those heavy weights off the ground in the gym in a very slow manner, or we're jogging, or maybe we're doing something that's high intensity, but you're making the case that all of us deserve to integrate some of this ballistic training, which I guess generally it's seen as whatever, like too dangerous or too high of an injury risk to dabble in. But again, this is going to be the way to injury prevention overall when we get good at it.
Exactly right. Yeah, I think I mean, I've been 3 years writing this book and which means I've had a million conversations with people who are worried about their bodies. And everybody immediately assumes there's something they could be doing way better, right? Everyone's like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm doing it wrong. They just kind of come at it with this, right? They've got their sore hip and they haven't called anybody and they don't know what to do. And should they go to a massage therapist or a physical therapist or like, what do you do? And and secondly, they feel like they screwed up like their movement, right? They know that they should move better, like it's supposed to go to yoga, but they didn't, or whatever the thing is. So I think this is good news, where it's been kind of this dark secrets of like you got a guy who knows about hips maybe and only takes
Mm.
cash,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
Desperate to go get somebody that
totally.
can help. Yeah.
Totally. But now they're like, no, we're going to make science out of this. We're going to really assess like how much hip external rotation do you need, and below which point is it a problem? And the trick is you want a different owner's manual to your body, right? So you can manage a little better. Right now, NBA players, most of them have that, but it's coming. Like the methods of assessment are coming to phones, they're coming to
Mm.
computer vision from like video feeds, and this will be the new normal. I'm totally confident that like the data set that matters will stop being MRIs and it'll start being how you move.
Mm. Right. We already see that at the cutting edge facilities like you describe at P3 or Dr. Jonathan, my guy worked at Altus down in
Hmm.
Arizona where a lot of the Olympic track and field athletes would come. But for the average person, I think it's still within reach to pull up some good programming on YouTube, or my friend Dr. Grayson runs this movement vault where you can sign up for a subscription. And I think generally what we're getting to is some simple assessments where if you suck at them, you can smile and realize, oh my goodness, this is going to get me injured because I can't hold a deep squat without falling back on my butt. That
Wait, have you
means
been watching me? That's like I know.
right before
Yeah.
we turned on the camera, he was in the corner there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's a good way to proceed where, we should demand of ourselves some basic functional abilities, especially as we age and we start to get into the concerns that we have with seniors. The disturbing stat that Peter T has been spouting a lot, where I think it's 38% of Americans over age 65 who fall and break a hip are dead within a year because of all the adverse consequences. They can't get out of bed. They get weakened, they get atrophied, and then they get pneumonia and die. So falling is like the government contends that this is the number one cause of demise and death in Americans over age 65. And it's so ridiculous because we should be able to avoid falling in the first place. And then if we do eat it, we have some functionality to make it not disastrous and not snap a bone.
Yeah, the WHO says immobility is the fourth leading cause of global death.
Woo!
And it contributes to so many cancers, heart disease, mental health problems, all things you wouldn't even think, right? And sleep problems, right? So just
Mm.
being still is not the answer, right? And so how do we get moving? I think a lot of us are in pain, right? A lot of us have either anxiety about pain or actual pain. And I think this is a little bit of a, look, you can manage this a little better. It's been confusing. What should you be doing? But I think the clouds are gonna part a little. For instance, hips. Hips are like such a big part of the story here. But every single athlete they've assessed needs help with their hips. And either they
Mm.
need more stability or more mobility.
Mm.
And you should know which club you're in and work on it. And so they have a little way. Do you want me to run through the little home assessment you can do for
Oh,
this?
sure. Yeah.
Okay, so if you can hold for 30 seconds a side plank, which is a particular side plank where you make your body a big X, arm elevated, leg elevated, all 10 toes pointing forward, body big. If you can lock that out for 30 seconds, then Marcus Elliott at P3 is willing to guess that your hips are stable enough.
Mm.
Similarly, if you can sink into a standing figure four, so stand on, say, your left leg, right ankle over your left knee, and then just sit back, butt back, you're balancing, chest up, and if you can get your hips down low, like the level of your knee kind of thing, then your hips are probably mobile enough.
I
If
get
you're,
you. Figure four, that makes a lot of
yeah,
sense. You get
yeah,
it, people? You're
yeah,
forming the letter. I mean, you're forming the number four. It's kind of like a popular yoga pose too. I don't know
yeah.
what the correct term is, but
I think it starts as tree and
tree
then
or
you
something.
sit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seated tree, let's call
A
it that.
seated tree pose. Thank you very much. Is that a 30-second hold as well, or is that just being able to show that you can get to that position?
To show you can get down
Yeah.
there. And so they would do a much fuller assessment of P3, but basically you're going to know if you're working on mobility or stability. And you're probably, the way it usually goes is you have workout habits that focus on the one you're good at, right? Like the people who can really sink into that tree thing, they already go to yoga. They work on their hip
Yeah.
mobility all the time, right?
Yeah.
They should lift weights. This is like the joke, right? Whereas the people who can lock out the stable hips, like they go to CrossFit all the time. They should go to yoga, right? Like,
Wow, that's heavy, man. I appreciate that. I remember when I was training really hard as a pro triathlete and putting in a lot of miles running, and I'd go to yoga class once a week, and it was so counter to what I was doing with running and creating that stiffness and going straight ahead only. And it was
mm,
always this battle where I'd be sore after my yoga session, or I'd be sore after running and go to yoga class. But it's kind of nice to see the flourishing of the hybrid athlete these days, where they're showing
mhm.
disparate skills. Not that I'm supporting some of that ridiculous extreme stuff where they lift 500 pounds and then go run 47 miles or something. That's a young person's game. But I think
Mhm.
for most people, whatever their main focal passion is, there's definitely some areas that they could sprinkle in to increase functionality in something that is not necessarily directly associated with their golf swing or whatever they love to do.
Totally. Yeah, I've evolved. Maybe this is because I'm 50, but like my movement goal here is to move like a puppy playing on the beach, right? I want to be able to frolic and have fun, right?
Henry's
I want
next
to
book will be coming out in 2028. It's called Puppy Playing on the
puppies on the
Beach.
beach. You would sell a lot of books with that, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But you want to have fun. You want to be playful. You want when someone says, "Hey, do you want to blank?" You want to say yes, right? And if it's not fun enough, I think it's kind of unsustainable. And I
Mm.
used to run, used to care about my times a lot. And if I run a 5K now, I know that exactly how much it's slower than I used to be. That's like a little bit of a bummer. Um, but these amorphous kind of nature-based outings feel really rewarding and fun to me and don't come with this clock being like, you're kind of old, dude. And I like that. So if you want to be playful, I think that jives a little more with like, yeah, I'll work on the thing my hips are bad at instead of the thing
Mm.
my hips are good at. Because like I'm just trying to be robust enough to do fun stuff, right? As opposed to, you know, I love super competitive people. That's
Mm.
my crew. But like, and I did this actually. I did a high rocks competition, which is kind of like what you're
Oh
talking
yeah.
about. Um, but here's my main takeaway. To be honest, I did it. Felt great. I was very excited. Then I was a judge at the wall ball station at the end, and when the happened to be when the elite women came through, and I was like, these are superhumans. Like,
Mm.
there's a whole different kind of strong female body around now in like big numbers. There were like 1,000 women that were just totally badass. And I was like, fire me up. I was like, I'm excited. There's just a kind of strong woman around in that sport that's like, there was nobody in my high school who was like that, right? And now there's like
Right.
hundreds and hundreds of these elite women who are just like, look what you guys are doing. They are like capturing something, right? We'll see where it goes, but it's totally badass.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you have to give some votes there for being the greatest all-around athletes. I think people are probably more familiar with CrossFit and the CrossFit games and the challenges they do, but it seems like High Rocks is similar where they're, providing a lot of power, explosiveness, but it's also a huge endurance component because it's a grueling course they go through. And yeah, these people, they're off the charts, man.
You kind of feel like we sometimes joke. I don't know why this has become a joke in our family, but who's on your bank robbing team? Like, you're gonna rob a bank? Who you got? You need people who don't talk too much. You need people who like have some special skills, whatever. Like, as I was judging, like, oh, everybody here can be my bank robbing team. Like, we'll go rob a
Oh my
bank.
God. I love that, man. I'm going to start using that.
It's an interesting way to see the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I mean, all it designates in one line is huge. Yeah, you don't want some pop off that's not going to be a team player because they're gonna drive away in the getaway car too early and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta know we're good. Like we gotta be on the same
Yeah,
page,
man.
And you
Yeah,
can't you gotta do your job, right? You gotta like
yeah,
we're counting on you. Yeah. But
love it.
that's a good place to shop. Go to High Rocks competition, get those elite women. Let's go rob some banks.
You said something earlier about dirty money in sport.
Oh my
I'd love
goodness.
to know more about that, what you mean.
Yeah, yeah. Oh goodness. So it started like this for me, where Jeffrey Epstein was in the news like crazy, but he had like I don't know if you remember all this, but it turned out that for the latter part of his I was gonna say career, but like whatever he had going on, he was this part's not controversial. He was funded by Leon Black, who's a private equity titan. He's from Apollo Global, which is the source of the billions that fund multiple NBA team owners.
Hmm.
And so I felt like it was kind of my job to be like, well, what's going on there? And I thought I would do like a little 6-part series, and it turned into like a 25-part series of just, global douchebags, basically. Just like offshore money, dirty banks, dirty lawyers. It just goes on and on and on. And it's kind of like the real world, it's true. It was just it's yeah, talk about a topic that people didn't want me to bring up at dinner, Like I was just full of oligarchs and CIA and drug running and private jets and just, yeah, we could talk about it, but it would be it would take a long time for me to kind of unload everything I'm carrying in my head right now.
Do you think it has any adverse influence on sports itself, or is this just sort of a dark side behind the scenes?
It's a great question. I do think it has adverse influence. I think that the valuations of teams are so high that like regular business people can't afford them. So somebody who just loves sports can't afford to buy a team because a lot of the value of the team is in um, sport washing, I call it, right? Like
Hmm.
gussying up the reputation of the billionaire behind it, right? So, Roman Abramovich seen as an unlikable oligarch, but he overpays for Chelsea, and now he's the Chelsea owner, Roman Abramovich, right? There's the famous arms dealer tried to buy the Utah Jazz, and it's like he was, this is what you do if you're super dirty, if you're sitting on a pile of dirty money. Sports are a great investment because they come with fans, right? It comes with people who are just gonna
Hmm.
wish you luck, wish you well,
Right.
and so I feel like
Image washing. Yeah.
yeah, and teams are poorly run by and large. I mean, there's
Yeah.
just and a lot of them have inattentive owners who like it's not really their business. It's not really what they're doing. They're off skiing or night clubbing or whatever, yachting, right? Whatever billionaires do. Meanwhile, the team's like hardworking general managers trying to get their attention to approve this really
Hmm.
well thought out trade, but they can't get the call through. This kind of
Yeah.
stuff. It's like,
Well, it's also interesting. We were just talking about this the other day in Sacramento, California, where we have the Kings, one of the, historically worst franchises of all sports. If you take like a 25-year window where they missed the playoffs, 15 years in a row, they made the playoffs for a few years and then they missed them again. And you either have that absentee owner that you described that doesn't know anything and doesn't care enough, or you have on the flip side a sports owner who is a huge success in business with a
mhm,
huge ego and thinks that they automatically know something about running a sports team and intervenes and offers their opinion and drives things like trades, signing athletes, signing coaches, general managers. And it's ridiculous because the best owner, I think like Jerry Buss, maybe the best of all time, or Mark Cuban gets some votes there where they were, totally hands-on. They loved the experience. It was the centerpiece of their life, and they trusted seasoned sports executives to make the best decisions, and they just supported the players and the team and created a family atmosphere of trust and appreciation.
totally. Yeah, sing it. I spent my whole life in this sports world, and behind the scenes, most of the really smart people who've worked in the league are like, it's a freak show, right? They're working for maniacs, right? And this is the big thing that what you're looking for if you're really good at running a team is like, where can I get some protection from an insane billionaire who's going to walk in
Hmm.
and ruin everything at some moment? There's actually one of the craziest moments in that it was on video in Sacramento, which was this Stauskas moment. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where
Nick Stauskas he was a shooting guard. I remember we drafted him. The Kings did.
And it was a terribly high pick, and it really didn't work out. And the moment that they decided who they're going to draft was owner Vivek Ranadive on video, between like Stauskas, and everyone's like, and all the rest of
It
the people who
became a
kind
meme or
of,
something.
yeah, and like they knew it was a bad idea. They're like Stauskas, and he's
Yeah.
like, yell it with me, ah, Stauskas, and it's like, it's a terrible pick. It was just, or the Sixers had one where the brand new billionaire guy watched a workout with a player named Arnett Moultrie, and he was just like, "That's it, shut it down. We're taking Arnett Moultrie," and just didn't pan out. Yeah, they're little monarchies. The NBA
Yeah.
teams are little monarchies, and it's not a great form of government. It's just you get
Right.
ahead by making the king believe that he's omnipotent, right? But you want to get ahead by winning games would be a better way to get ahead, right? But they just, or I know a guy who used to work for a team, And if they would put together like a complicated set of transactions so they could get out of salary cap hell and
Mhm.
become legitimately good in the future. But the way they would sell it to the owner is they would just say, "Hey, we can get a former dunk champ. Look at these highlights." And he'd be like, "Yeah, give me that
Yeah,
guy."
yeah.
And like,
You had to trick the owner in order to
yeah,
do your economically viable.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. What's fascinating to me is like the sophistication of the recruiting and the scouting and the evaluations, but it seems like still we're many steps behind optimal when these guys slip through the cracks or these overhyped guys. What's your opinion on that whole scene?
Well, like the best player in the world right now is Nikola Jokic, and he was drafted in the second round. Literally every team could have had him, right? Like every single team passed on him.
Yeah.
So that's a miss, right? There's a few different things going on there. I think one is the jobs of the people in the front office are very short. So
Hmm.
they might think Nikola Jokic is a great long-term play, but they probably won't be around in 4 years when he starts being
Oh,
good. So
that's brutal. It's like
yeah,
a it's like the performing for the quarterly earnings report instead of
exactly.
doing the long-term best interest of the company. Yeah.
It's mostly that, right? It's mostly that.
Oof. That's
This,
brutal to hear that's filtered into sports, man. That's heartbreaking, really.
yeah, you can't really afford to lose the press conference, right? If everyone thinks you screwed up, then you're out. You're gonna get fired,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. They're very the billionaires are very sensitive to public sentiment. So if everybody thinks that it's stupid, even if it's smart, then it's stupid. I think that's a big part of it. The other thing is this one I don't blame them so much for, but uh, the biggest factor in Nikola Jokic going from I think he was the 40 something pick to best player in the world is his improvement, right?
Mm.
He worked on stuff, and that's hard to predict, but
Mm.
not impossible to predict. I think if you're shopping for how good is your team at helping him improve, then almost anybody who comes in the door. The Thunder right now are the best team in the NBA and clearly the best at taking like a mediocre defensive player, making them a good defensive player, and a mediocre shooter and making them a good shooter. And so they have the kinds of players that every team could have had, but they've made
Mm.
them better. And they're going to win lots of championships because of it, right? So that's really, I think, the most important factor in being an elite team nowadays is just player development, which is a little bit of a lost art in the NBA. We just aren't, most teams just aren't good at it at all.
Well, they have no time or energy to do so because they're trying to win every game, and there's guys sitting on the edge of the bench. I remember watching J.R. Smith about 20 years ago, early in his career, and we got to the arena early, and he was out there going full gas with one of the trainers for maybe a 40-minute session where he's draining threes and dunking. I'm like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
He'd come right from the high school to the pros. I'm like, this guy's going to be amazing. He's better than anyone we're going to see later tonight. But he wasn't getting any minutes in the games. And so he had this unique one-on-one workout where if you're going to sit all night, we might as well, work on some of your skills. And it was kind of neat to see that that player was on his own path, and he eventually became a star. Maybe underperformed for his talent level, but I'm teeing up a question here as I ramble. But when you're thinking about investing in this multi-million dollar economic asset, and you put him through the combine and you put him through the evaluation and the private workout, but like, is there another level that we could go to in the future where, I don't know, like you hire a private investigator to go hang around campus and see who the person's buddies are and whether they have good study habits or whether they're polite to the Uber driver that takes them to the hotel for their pre-draft workout. That's the part that is curious to me because these players of like high character, high work ethic, they've been passed over for decades because they didn't have the physicality of the guy who was jumping out of the gym. And it seems like at some point we should kick into another gear and say what really makes a champion athlete is that work ethic, that resilience, that family oriented, well balanced lifestyle, or whatever you want to call it.
It's happening. They do that. They have those private investigators. But I think it's very tough. There's so many variables in not just projecting this player's progress, but also how they're going to fit in the team.
Mm,
And there's just some people like I'm super lucky. In my business True Hoop am partnered with David Thorpe, who invented this like private training business where he has 13 NBA clients in the playoffs right now. So these are amazing players who he talks to every day with like, here's your game plan for taking on tonight's opponent. Here's what we're working on short term, medium term, long term. And he has a weird, I honestly don't understand it, but he can watch a player, like he could watch that J.R. Smith workout you're talking about. And he would immediately say, "Oh, like, because of the nature of the league and who you're gonna have to guard, we need to right now focus on something." That when he said it, we'd all
Mm,
be like, "Oh, that's so smart." But
mm,
quite commonly, JR's assistant coach from the team wouldn't have said that thing to him.
mm,
And so, you know, the game is not the most complex game, but it's pretty complicated. It happens really fast, and you want to have these little habits baked in that you have to train. And
mm.
someone like JR, he probably could have been the next Michael Jordan, but also could have been out of the league just based on, does he help the team win, which is based on it's like, big brain, a whole bunch of
Mm.
little moments that can he master this one and that one? Can he guard this guy or that guy? And can he, drive this driver into that help defender? And it happens so fast. It's hard to notice in real time if he's that guy. But I think this is what the Thunder are doing really well. I'm rooting for them just because it's so fun to see, you know, Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe and these players that every team could have had like on the court as they're outscoring the best teams in the league by 20 because they're doing all these little things well. Like
Yeah.
there's no reason every team couldn't have that kind of player development, right?
Right. And we still obsess, especially the fans, with just buying a championship by paying massive dollars for superstars. And we've been seeing now that it simply doesn't work, which is kind of refreshing, in my opinion, that you can't just go pick and pull the guys from the All-Star game and form a lineup and dominate.
That's the best. Yeah, um LeBron's generation of players, so he's 40 now, were
Whew.
very influential in the union, right? And
Mm,
they changed the rules so that their generation of players could earn a tremendous amount. They were very
mm,
underpaid when they were like
hmm
25. And so they fixed it. But they're getting now basically these super max contracts are only available to older players.
mm,
And so it particularly screws the teams that are trying to assemble superstars, right? Like the Phoenix Suns were like, oh, they got three superstar players getting these huge contracts. And they tied my young rebuilding Portland Trailblazers team I grew up rooting for with, I think, 36 wins this year. So they have the most expensive team in the league, and it just doesn't work because you're
mm,
getting old players. It's
mm.
just not, this is a super explosive athletic game, and you don't want to be 34. There's a few players who can still
Yeah,
hang.
LeBron training his butt off and doing everything
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
but mostly not, right? Mostly you don't want to be 34. Mostly you want to be 26. It's way better,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's I think that's the problem is that these superstar assembly teams are old teams and expensive teams, and you're just not going to be the best in the league like that.
Do you think there's any waning of motivation in modern day NBA ballers because they've bagged so much money that they literally have no financial incentive anymore to continue? But they're out there on the court, and I'm sure they don't mind getting the paycheck. But it seems different than perhaps in a different generation where you could be set for life if you really worked hard and grinded that career to the maximum, which we still see in other sports like golf or tennis or something where you could be gone tomorrow unless you win a tournament.
I I this question is a good one, and it makes me mad at the league. Let me explain why. So, um, we see players not playing super hard, and then
Mm,
we have playoff intensity this time of year when we see what it looks like when they do play super hard, right? So it could be that there are some, people get fat and happy. That's a thing that could happen, but I've never encountered it, right? Like
mm,
they make the NBA, the stats are like about 1 billion people play basketball on planet Earth,
mm.
and 350 make the NBA. It's you're more likely to be an American who's a US in the US Senate than a basketball player who's in the NBA, right? So they have these amazing jobs. It's not just money for them. It's also, you roll through life as a minor god, a minor deity because you're in the NBA. And just outside the NBA, nobody cares, right?
Oof.
It's just so I think they really, really want to do well. And
Mm.
mostly, like this guy David Thorpe I was talking about, he sometimes will meet his players in person because he's always talking to them remotely because they're all over the place. But when they meet in person, he's like, "Hey, we should have a beer or a glass of wine." And like no one will have a glass of wine with him because in season it's just too intense. They're
Wow.
so hardcore. They are just lean athletic machines, every single one of them. They just have to do so much work. So it just doesn't. I think what we're seeing is just that the season's stupidly designed so that going super hard doesn't work. And I think it feeds into this idea that like, oh, they're lazy. But like I think it's actually like the behind the scenes, I think that's just totally wrong. I think that they're wildly hardworking and just kind of tired.
Love it, Henry. That is a really nice thing to say, and I think it's dead on accurate. And I think a lot of the fans that chat on the internet or wherever they're spouting their opinion where they don't know anything, we should take your words to heart. And I appreciate that because, yeah, these guys generally are performing at the highest level of human athleticism. And if you think they're dogging it, why don't you go out there and try for a few minutes to run at that pace for an NBA game. So with the book Ballistic, let's close with a nice plug here about what the medium or the serious fitness enthusiast is going to learn and what kind of journey they're going to go through when they grab this book.
Your body's super well designed to move. It wants to, and it's well designed for it. You can bounce around, jump around. I think we all kind of know there's something that you have on the horizon that you were thinking about doing. Maybe you want to go play pickleball. Maybe you're
Mm.
thinking about signing up for a 5K. Maybe you want to go ballroom dancing. And I think do that, right? You can do more than you think. And yeah, there might come a time where you need to do a little PT or some kind of prepping. And there's some basic principles in the book with illustrations of, the most common sources of injury are these issues with your hips, these issues with your feet. Yeah, pay a little attention to that. Work on your weaknesses, but mostly, I think get ready to be a puppy on the beach, right? Get ready to be a person who says yes when I say, "Do you want to come play kickball or whatever?" Right? Let's do fun stuff.
Love it. The book is called Ballistic: The New Science of Injury-Free Athletic Performance. I can't wait to. It's going to get me further focused on the benefits of doing that type of exercise as I battle my minor Achilles injuries and realize that we didn't really get to this, but maybe this is a good closing statement for you to comment on that we've been socialized to think like if you get a nick or an ache and pain or something, that you sit around and rest and cross your fingers, and then hopefully you'll magically return to the court or the trail and everything will be fine. And it seems like that's now getting blown out of the water. Henry's shaking his head if you're watching on video, but now it's a whole different deal, huh?
I love this doctor in San Francisco, Rachel Zoffness, and she's a pain psychologist. She has a whole
Mm,
chapter that focuses on her findings. And
mm,
her thing is we have to separate acute injuries from chronic injuries. Like, we have the impulse to retreat, right? The wounded animal will go off and be alone with your acute injury, your bleeding wound or whatever, right? Fine, it works great for that. Retreating works for that. But for your chronic injuries, it's like the only way it gets better is you have to move out of pain, right? You have to
mm.
convince your brain can send the same pain signals anywhere. If you are convinced that this will hurt you, your body will send a pain signal. Like it's like pain is your brain's opinion that you're in danger. So movement is the way to change your brain's opinion. You're going to show it like, okay, I'm okay to walk up this hill. I'm okay to
Yeah.
to, you know, jump a little bit or whatever it is.
But where is that fine line, for example, if I feel that little twinge in my Achilles and I'm wondering, should I participate in the workout or not? I don't want to be king wimp of the planet and not do anything till I feel perfect, but I also don't want to aggravate things and bring further trauma to the area that's not right.
So my today answer is going to
Today,
disappoint
tomorrow will be
you.
different, but
Like the technology will come that you could just like I think you want to see how you land generally, right?
mm,
Are the three stack joints of your
mm,
landing working in unison? How much force is on your Achilles is really the question, right? They could tell you that. They could tell you that in 20 minutes if you went to Santa Barbara, right? Like, and if you have wildly big forces on your Achilles, then yeah, you probably don't want to, which would come from the common way that would happen would be, you're not using your hips properly, which is very
mm.
common, and so you're disproportionately stressing the other joints. Um, but on the other hand, a lot of things are sore that are just not that dangerous, right? It happens, and in which case you can move out of pain by continuing to do that and convincing your brain that it's okay. And I'm sorry that I can't. I would love to tell you that I could assess you from here, but I'm not
Yeah,
even a doctor.
yeah, yeah.
So-
Well, developing that philosophy and then going and seeking expert guidance, I think is the way to go here, especially the more, devoted and the passionate you get about living a healthy, active, energetic lifestyle. There's a lot of people that are just slaves to whatever ache and pain they're feeling, and then limiting their their options and
Yeah.
continuing to narrow where they can't do much as the years go by.
Everybody gets stuff, right? Everybody has something that's sore. And I think the trick is you want to make them, in Marcus's words, speed bumps, right? You want to
Mm,
make it rather than like, oh my gosh, I'm on the shelf for 6 months. No, no, you
yeah,
want to be generally strong. You want to generally move well. You want to have good command of your joints. And then when something comes up, all right, you got to take a week, deal with that rather than
yeah.
6 months.
Yeah. Well, what I've also experienced, which is another great insight to kind of wrap this up, is when I do get some problem, like my Achilles is feeling hot after workouts lately, when I further devote myself to the single leg calf raises on the slant board holding the kettlebell, it actually gets better. So the
Isn't that
more I
weird?
move, the more blood flow, the more devotion I have to working this injured area, of course, in a sensible manner where it's not bringing on, further pain and dysfunction. But it's not fun to work an injured Achilles doing single leg calf raises holding weight. But it's the way to heal, and that's been a real eye opener for me to completely, shatter this old mindset where it's wait, cross your fingers, and then go for your first run in 6 weeks. In the old days, the runners would just lay off. Like when I was in college, I got injured. I sat around and, wasted time, and then went back to the track and tried to run a mile. And that was not an optimal way to proceed to higher levels of performance.
Yeah, and conceivably your Achilles issue is because you have poor mobility in your hips, right? 6 weeks of sitting is going to bring your hip mobility to
Even worse.
zero,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, but you're doing it. You're doing this is exactly the kind of thing they'd recommend. And the soleus, one of those muscles I mentioned, it improves the blood flow. Like it draws the blood, it pumps the blood back up to your heart. So as
Mm,
you're doing your calf raises with your weights, you're you're permanently improving the blood flow through this
mm,
part of your body where you want to have
mm.
more blood flow, right? It's
Getting
going to
healthy. All right.
get healthy. Yeah.
Henry, how do we connect with you? I know we can buy Ballistic anywhere books are sold.
HenryAbbott.com is my author website where there's a newsletter all inspired by the book called Writing Activity, and all the places I'm doing talks and media and blah, blah, blah are in there. And you can also order the book from anywhere you want to order it, including your local bookshop. And my last name is Abbott. People don't like to give you that last T, but HenryAbbott.com would be the place to go.
Henry Abbott, everyone. Ballistic, the new science of injury-free athletic performance. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching, listening to the show.